Hey everybody, this is Courtney Rowland and Mark Passwaters with the AggieYell F Word podcast, meaning football podcast. A&M has gone through one game against Sam Houston State. They have Appalachian State ahead of us. Mark, let's just start with Sam Houston State. What were your thoughts on the Aggies win? They did get a win. There was a crazy halftime of 3 hours long. But what were your overall thoughts?
Well, I hate 3-hour halftimes. I learned that. But outside of that, kind of a mixed bag. I think that Sam is one of the better FCS schools. I've said all week that I thought that if they were eligible to play in Conference USA this year, they'd win it. I mean, they're a good team. I think that the problems that A&M had, though, had more to do with A&M than they did with Sam. And that's running the football, the offensive line play as a whole, the mistakes made by Haynes King. Those things are frustrating, but they seem to be repetitive. I mean, you take a look, you go back to 2020, and if you and I were doing this podcast going into week 2 of the 2020 season, we talk about how the offensive line stunk out loud, how bad they were against Vandy, and then they didn't give up a sack for 7 games. So you never know. But, I mean, defensively, I thought that they played really well. I thought it was fun to see all the freshmen out there and for them to perform at the level they did. I didn't think that they'd be able to do that fast. And, for those guys to go out there and play at that level right off the bat is very, very good and, makes you think positively about the, where things go the rest of the season. Because what are these guys going to be like once they figure things out? And, that's going to be really fun. I think the cornerback play was good, and they rotated a lot of guys there. They'll get stronger there this weekend when Jalen Jones comes back. So, I mean, defensively, I really like what they did. I think that they probably left the field thinking that they left some out there on defense, that they could have had more sacks or more turnovers. But hey, you won 31-0. You held them under 200 yards of total offense. 1 out of 12 on third downs. Okay, you'll take that.
Okay, so that was Sam Houston. They have Appalachian State coming up. Do you think this team can mature quickly enough to play a team like Miami, who scored 70 plus points, and be able to beat them in one weekend?
Well, let's keep in mind that they put 70 points up against Bethune-Cookman, who went 2-9 last year in the SWAC. They got crushed by a Prairie View team that A&M turned around and crushed. So, it wasn't like they were out there against some great opponent. That was the ultimate cupcake. So you got to keep that in mind. But there's maturing that needs to be done, and if it's not for Miami, it's for Arkansas. And you got a short period of time there where you got to figure this stuff out. And they say that the most progression is done between week 1 and week 2. I think we got to put that to the test this week, because there are things that they need to work on and get right so they can really keep momentum going into SEC play.
And does Appalachian State worry you at all, considering, they scored 40 points in the fourth quarter against North Carolina, UNC, and almost won the game?
No, and I'll tell you why. UNC 2 weeks ago played Florida A&M, and Florida A&M was missing 26 scholarship players, and they still scored 24 points on UNC. That was a game into the third quarter. Florida A&M got a lot of guys back, including former Aggie Jordan Moore, and they played Jackson State last weekend. Guess how many points they got?
How many?
Count them.
3. 1, 2, 3.
They lost 59-3 to Deion's bunch. So they were moving the ball up and down the field on Carolina, and they were extremely shorthanded. So Carolina's defense is god-awful. And Appalachian State's defense was worse than theirs. That alone makes me think that A&M can handle the game. But on the other hand, I have never seen a more experienced team than Appalachian State. I mean, I tweeted out this morning, I think they may have some guys in AARP. I've never seen so many 6th-year seniors, 5th-year juniors. I mean, they have taken full advantage of the extra COVID year, and they're an extremely veteran team. But I think the counterpoint to that is while A&M is still waiting for the freshmen to really get their feet wet and figure these things out, they figure things out. They are what they are. So I don't see their defense progressing that much, and I think that their offense is going to be very good, but not to the level that they can sit there and shoot it out, or have the ability to shoot it out with A&M.
Okay, so a lot of people, fans, and media are being a little dramatic about the quarterback play in Haynes King. And although he did have some interceptions and some balls that could have been interceptions, he also had some big down the field plays. What are your thoughts around Haynes King? Will we see a quarterback change? What does he need to work on? Where should fans feel at this point about Haynes King?
Okay, anybody who's calling for a quarterback change or thinks there's one coming need to have their heads examined. That's not happening. It was really funny because today I was putting together the matchup between A&M's defense and App State's offense, and Chase Bryce, the quarterback for Appalachian State, threw for 6 touchdowns last week. Haynes King threw for more yards than he did. So that kind of caught my attention. Of course, their running game was better, but King's performance overall, he completed 64% of his passes, threw for 364 yards, threw for the 3 touchdowns. All those are positives. The desire to go down the field, and he's like 7th in the country at 11.6 yards an attempt. So that's a good thing. The mistakes are things that he's got to rectify. And I think some of it's inexperience. Some of it is just a belief in himself that time will either rectify or then he'll get in trouble. But I think that the opportunity is there for him to do big things, and he's got the weapons to do big things. So, people looking for Max right now, that isn't happening.
But do you think Haynes can be the elite quarterback A&M needs for what the fans want, which is an SEC championship, which is a national championship?
Well, here's the thing. Who was the quarterback at Georgia last year when they won the national championship? Stetson Bennett, a former walk-on. If you get the right personnel and the right scheme, you can win games and you can win national championships without that great quarterback. Now, having said that, it's a whole lot easier to win it with a great quarterback, and he's going to have to improve. But I think that the opportunity is there for him to do big things, and he's got the weapons to do big things. So, people looking for Max right now, that isn't happening.
But do you think Haynes can be the elite quarterback A&M needs for what the fans want, which is an SEC championship, which is a national championship?
Well, here's the thing. Who was the quarterback at Georgia last year when they won the national championship? Stetson Bennett, a former walk-on. If you get the right personnel and the right scheme, you can win games and you can win national championships without that great quarterback. Now, having said that, it's a whole lot easier to win it with a great quarterback, and he's going to have to improve. But I think that his desire to push the ball down the field is great. The conservative passing game that we've seen the last couple of years didn't really help a whole lot. I think that as he matures, he'll probably make better decisions. He's got that speed that hopefully we'll get to see in action at some point. The tools are there. It's just a matter of taking potential and putting it to production. And I know that's a phrase that I've used over and over and over, especially talking about the defense, but it definitely applies in the case of Haynes King.
You said, we hope to see him in action. A couple times, on Saturday, seeing him run the ball made me a little bit nervous. Like him running the ball like he did against SEC defensive linemen makes me a little nervous. Do you think he can stay healthy?
Well, that's the question. I think that, you and I both heard the same thing when he took off to run the first time, and that's 97,000 people going, you know, I mean, literally people holding their breath, and I don't blame them because, you go back to last year, how did he get hurt? Running the ball. Has he learned to slide yet? No. And that just drives me absolutely batty. Learn to get your butt on the ground. This lunging forward stuff does nobody any good. So he's got to knock that off. But I really would like to see him get the opportunity to run in the open field. We keep on hearing about how fast he is, and Yul Keith Brown said during the press conference this week that he would have Haynes as the lead leg in a 4x100 if the football team ran it. With him and A-Chain and I forget who else. I think it was Evan Stewart being the 4 fastest guys. Okay, great. I want to see it. But I think the hesitancy.
So that brings me to another point.
Yeah.
Why was he not able to do that, and why was A-Chain not able to do that?
Well, I think there were
concerned with the offensive line.
I think a lot of it has to do with the offensive line. I also think there was some hesitancy with him. I think that, we weren't the only ones holding our breath. I'm sure that in the back of his mind, he was worried about it too. And that's only human. It's only perfectly natural. So, I think that probably had a little bit to do with it. But I mean, to be perfectly honest, he didn't have a whole lot of running room. When he would try to cut off on the edge, get outside, there was nothing there. And that's on the offensive line. That's not on him. And,
right.
A lot of the problems with the offense last week, the running game, Haynes' inability to run, A-Chain's inability to run, they all go back to the fact that, Sam Houston had guys in the backfield, and there's not much you're going to be able to do if that's the case.
So everything you're saying, we can't totally put all blame on the running backs or the wide receivers or Haynes King. And the offensive line seems like the core group here to make this team successful. So what do they do?
Well, the thing that they need to do is get out there and take rep after rep after rep after rep as a unit. Mm-hmm. Jimbo keeps saying, I've heard him say it at the press conference on Saturday, heard him say it at the press conference Monday. He said it on his radio show last night. You can't have 4 guys working together and 1 guy working separate. They've all got to be working together. It's got to be 5 guys as 1 unit, not 5 individuals. And on Saturday, there was an awful lot of 5 individuals. And it wasn't just one guy screwing up. It was the one guy mess up, the next guy messes up, the third guy messes up. And before you know it, you're repeatedly in 2nd and 9, 3rd and 8 situations because guys aren't doing their assignments and they're not familiar with the guy next to them. So there's that element of a lack of trust and a lack of knowledge of what they're going to do as opposed to what they're supposed to do. And, that was a real issue on Saturday. I think that you saw how important Bryce Foster can be to this offensive line. And I think that Layden Robinson being banged up definitely was a problem. And I think that, I don't want to bash Aki Ogunbaye or anything like that, but I think that them going so late into the summer, not knowing who was going to be guy 1, whether it be him or Jordan Moko, that kind of hurt too, because you're trying to get those guys out there, get them together, get that full unit. And when you're still rotating, and they even did it on Saturday, you're not going to get that cohesiveness, I don't think. I mean, it's purely my opinion, but I think that, that's an issue. And the only thing that will fix that is time. And it's a matter of how much time do you have and how much do you need?
Yeah, that's the scary part, right? They've got, Appalachian State, then Miami, and then, you start the grind of the season of the SEC play. Do you think this offensive line in 1 week's time can handle Miami and SEC play? Can they stand up for themselves?
I think I think we can't say right now. We got to see what they do next week or on Saturday. Now, do I think that they're capable of doing it? Yeah. Am I sold on Miami's defense? Not in the least. I don't think they're very good. But when they start getting into SEC play, Arkansas's had a lot of turnover, but they're still going to be physical. Sam Pittman's going to want to play smash mouth. They're going to be tough. They're going to play, as hard as they can, borderline dirty, maybe a little bit extra, fun after the tackle, or after the whistle. And then you got Mississippi State in there, and they're experienced. And of course, you've got, the monster in Tuscaloosa eventually. They've got to get it together. And, will it help when Bryce comes back? Yeah. But you've still got to get that unit cohesion. And they clearly did not have it, last week. The best hope that I have for it coming quickly is 2020, when they played like a dog on the first night. And even though they played Alabama the next week, Kellen Mond wasn't touched. Kellen Mond didn't get sacked. He didn't get sacked the week after that. I think they went until LSU, back in late October until he was sacked again. Is this a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line? Probably not. But can it still be upper echelon? Yeah, and the talent dictates that it should be.
Real quick. Come here, buddy. My dog wants to get in on the video. Buddy, come here. Come here. I don't know if everyone can see him. Here's Buddy. Yeah. Anyways, okay, so you mentioned about like the monster, the big dog, Alabama. They're playing Texas this weekend. What are your expectations there?
Thoughts and prayers. No, I think that, we have seen in past years when Nick Saban senses a threat or Nick Saban wants to make a point, he tends to do it. And I think that, everybody's like, oh, well, Sark's got his number because, assistant, blah, blah, blah. If Jimbo and Kirby broke that streak last year, Texas coming to the SEC, good recruiting class, yada, yada, yada. He's going to send a message that this is not the Big 12 that you're coming into. Mm-hmm. This is not, you sit there and play 48, 46 games. This is called, you have to be physical on both lines of scrimmage. And if you're not, we're going to crush you. And I think
Saban's not afraid to run up that score.
No. And I'm sure that he's sitting there and he's telling his guys, these arrogant sots in Austin think they're better than you, that they're more talented than you. They're making more money than you. He's pushing every button he can. And he this is a national television audience. This is Fox's biggest game of the year right off the bat, big 11 a.m.
I mean, but, and also just, because Texas has been, a very great program in the state of Texas, right? They've recruited well. They do bring in tons of donors, tons of money, boosters, etc. In the past, they had A&M's number. Now A&M has their number, and it goes back and forth.
Right.
So should you expect a program to come in there and be, a 19-point favorite or 3-touchdown favorite? Like that's kind of embarrassing.
A little bit, but I think they were a 17-point favorite coming into Kyle Field last year. So
were they?
There is that. But here's the thing. People recognize that Alabama is physical. They're physical on both sides of the ball. They have the best offensive player in Bryce Young. They have the best defensive player in Will Anderson. They have a strong supporting cast around them. They can run right at you. They can throw on you, and they're tough to run on. And what does Texas have? We really don't know. They played a crappy ULM team. They've got a lot of different pieces. They've got a lot of, they're still trying to be cohesive as a team because they've made so many changes. And I think that those elements play into it. And, outside of playing A&M last year and losing, and in the national championship game, they've played very well when the attention is on them. And game day is going to be there. It's the big Fox game. I think SEC Nation's going to be there. I mean, this is a big deal. And like you said, recruiting's a key element here. Alabama wants to recruit well in Texas. Texas and A&M want to stop that. One of the things that Alabama can do to best improve their recruiting in the state of Texas is to stomp a Texas team.
Yeah.
They can sit there and say, hey, look, these guys are not on our level. They are still not on our level. If you want to win, You want to win big, you come to Tuscaloosa. If you want to get a Bentley, I guess you go to Austin. But you know,
So for
it
A&M's
depends.
sake, who does A&M want to win
Oh,
for
I
their
think.
sake this season?
Oh, I think Alabama, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, because, for two reasons. One, if Alabama goes in there and stomps Texas, how many of their recruits sit there and start having second thoughts like maybe these guys aren't as far down the road as I thought they were? You know, and that could have a domino effect going into 2024 and when they come in the conference. On the other hand, a Texas win, you know, boosts them considerably. Alabama's already got a great class. We already know they're really good. We already know they're the primary obstacle for A&M. They're also the obstacle that's on the schedule. So you can take care of that problem if you do things right. So without a doubt, I mean, the Sporting News called this afternoon and they asked me that question. And I was like, any Aggie in their right mind is rooting for Alabama. And it, you know, and they're like, yeah, but A&M and Alabama don't like each other. I'm like, okay, they haven't liked each other for 4 months or haven't liked each other for 4 months. A&M and Texas have hated each other for 100 years. Who do you think they're going to pick? You know,
And not just that, but just like rankings potential.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and if Texas, I think right now is playing their typical ego game, they think they're good. And the people in Austin are boosting them, you know, that yeah, you're good, you're ready, blah, 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 blah. If they go out there and they get stomped, that starts the question. You know, how good are we? Can we compete? You know, are we the same team that lost to Kansas? You know, this, that, and the other thing. It's, you know, this can be the real reality check, a week 2 reality check for Texas. And the hype machine that they have somehow created over a crappy 5-7 team last year goes right out the window. So, you know, if Alabama goes in there and whips on them, and let's face it, you put those depth charts up against each other, it's not close. Alabama's got the talent edge by a mile.
Right.
Yeah, there are spare parts from Alabama that are starting for Texas, or would start if they weren't in trouble.
I feel like Stark in a press conference earlier already this week was kind of almost just like defending the fact if they lose, you know, giving excuses on if they lose.
Yeah, when you sit there, it's like
look.
one game does not define our season, and you're saying that 6 days before you play it. That's pretty, you know. That's that's a very defeatist way of looking at things. And you know, is it true? Yeah, it's a non-conference game. On the other hand, you never want to sit there and just be like, yeah, if we lose, we lose. And that was how it came off, whether it was intentional or not. You know, it sounded, you know, it sounded very, I don't want to say tone deaf. I don't think that's a right word, but you know, it's something along those lines. It's kind of like not exactly what you probably wanted to say.
Right. Yeah. And not fired up.
No, it definitely does not imbue your players with a sense of confidence when your coach comes out and it's like, oh yeah, it's an important game, but I mean, it's not that important. You know, when he said our goal is to be in Dallas in December, you know, that's just a dodge. You know, and it's a tacit admission that he doesn't think they can stack up.
Going back to games this past weekend, what games stood out to you that, you know, could affect A&M? Obviously, there was movement in the rankings. A&M stayed the exact same, but a lot of teams shifted around them. What games did you think stood out, and maybe what games do you think we should be focused on this weekend other than A&M and Appalachian State?
Well, Georgia's demolition of Oregon caught my eye. Not that they won. Not that they won significantly, but 49-3? That's just ridiculous. And, you know, Oregon sitting here talking about their explosive offense. Well, they still got Bo Nix. And Bo Nix and explosive offense, they haven't dated in a long time. I think they broke up and it was very ugly because he ain't it. You know, and that could be really a problem for Oregon's recruiting. I mean, we've seen them. They're trying to get into Texas too. They're trying very hard to get into Texas, but I think that they are in a situation where the Pac-12 is in trouble already. They were the chosen to come out of there. It's them and USC, and when you go out there and you get stomped, by 46 in your opener, you don't come back from that. I mean, if there was a 12-team playoff, like in the future, that's fine. But they're done. I mean, Utah lost, so there's another problem. So what's left? I mean, USC, and who have they played so far? Rice.
So what do you think about that game? Because they stomped them.
It's Rice.
Yeah.
Rice is going to wear some real cool uniforms this weekend and probably get stomped again. But Rice is one of the 10 worst teams in FBS. It is what it is. They just don't have the wherewithal to compete. But some of the other games, I thought the LSU Florida State game was one that was interesting on multiple levels. One, the insanity of how it ended. Two, just how bad LSU played. I mean, they were doing
last drive.
They were doing until that last drive, and that had as much to do with FSU as it did LSU. I'm still not sold on FSU being any good, but I'm pretty sold on LSU being bad. They were.
Kelly's there for what? 10 years? 10-year contract?
10-year, $95 million at least. I think it's more than that. I don't think they're being honest with the numbers. I think it's more like 112. But they just did things fundamentally wrong. I mean, they didn't cover their gap assignments. They didn't tackle well. The receivers didn't run their routes right. Kayshon Boutte looked like he could care less that he was there. They couldn't push the ball down the field. The offensive line stunk. Your best defensive lineman blew out his knee just jumping up and down. I mean, he didn't even really do anything bad. I mean, of all the things to get hurt on.
Who is it that I'm hearing that could be entering the transfer portal? Because
they're talking about Boutte, and
okay. You think there's any truth to that?
No, I mean, if he wants to go somewhere, he'll just flip him double rods and say, I'm declaring for the draft. He'll just do what Jamar Chase did. I don't think you got anything to worry about there. I mean, I woke up Monday morning to a couple of texts like, yeah, Boutte to College Station. Like, no, he's not going to do that. Do I think he's displeased with the situation at LSU? Yeah, I think that's transparent. But I don't think he's going anywhere. And then, you take a look at the rest of that. You have 2 muff punts. You have a blocked field goal. You have a blocked extra point. Former Aggie special teams coach Brian Polian not looking good in week 1 there. And, but it's not just Coach Polian. I mean, just across the board, they looked bad.
Yeah.
And they have way too much talent to be that bad.
Undisciplined to me, it seemed like.
Yes, very undisciplined. That's a great way of putting it. I mean, the targeting penalty that Gay got. I mean, come on, they're going to be showing that for 20 years. That's the prototype for targeting.
Yeah.
I'm
not huge on the targeting rule, but when it comes to situations like that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he launched himself helmet to helmet
right. Completely
at Travis. I mean, there's nothing you can say there except get out. I mean, it was indisputable. So, I mean, that game stood out to me. Alabama's didn't stand out because I expected them to do what they did. Let's see.
What about games you're looking forward to this weekend? We already talked about Alabama, Texas. Any other games that you're interested in?
I've been so into the 2 games that are in state this week, with A&M playing Appalachian State, and whether you want to even think about it or not, there's always that little thought of Michigan in 2007 in the back of your mind. But I mean, what are some of the good games this week? There aren't that.
Who's Baylor playing?
Who's Baylor playing? That's a good
Yeah,
question.
because
Let's see.
they're right up there in the top 10.
Yeah, Tennessee and Pitt is an interesting one. I think Tennessee will win that one, but it's at Pitt, so you don't know. Florida and Kentucky. That's one I'm interested in because Anthony Richardson looked really good against Utah. Utah threw away a chance to win that game late. Literally threw it away. But I mean, he looked really good. And this is a guy that you and I talked about last year. I thought that he was going to break out, and it just really didn't happen. Because they stuck with Emory Jones a little longer, and then he seemed pretty raw when he got the shot. But he looked great against Utah. So I'm curious to see what he can do against Kentucky's defense, which is pretty good. Baylor plays BYU. So that's one of the games that has two ranked teams. There aren't very many ranked against ranked this week. Kentucky and Florida is another one. And then Tennessee and Pitt. And really, that's about it. I mean, there are a lot of dogs this week. I mean, Ohio State plays Arkansas State. Let's see, Duke plays Northwestern. That's an interesting game. They may be able to exchange trigonometric equations at halftime.
So you mentioned the 12-team football playoff in the future. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that? Like it? Don't like?
Intriguing. Jimbo talked about it on his radio show last night, and he said that if you have a 12-team playoff, 20 or 30 teams go into the final month of the season with something to play for, and that's true. And I certainly think that teams that get hot late in the season will have a greater opportunity to make some noise with a 12-team playoff. I mean, think about the Aggies in 2012. How would they have done in a 12-team playoff with Johnny playing at the level that he was playing at the end of that season? The defense had put it together. Mike Evans was hot. Ryan Swope was playing great. The running game was good. You had a best offensive line maybe in college football history. They would have been a real potential threat to win that thing. Then 2020, A&M's right there in the playoff. They'd be one of the top 5 seeds. What could happen in a situation like that? So I think that teams that lose early won't necessarily be dead in a 12-team playoff. Teams like Oregon, you lose 49-3, yeah, you're probably gone. But if you lose 31-20 or something like that to a team that is a top 5 elite program, and then you go out and win the rest of your games, you're in it. You deserve to be in it. Even if you don't win your conference, if you're a Power 5 team and you end up 11-1, odds are you deserve to be in the playoff. So teams that have missed out in the past, with unrightfully, let's put it that way, they're going to be in this thing, and I think that's great. And the TV numbers, I'm sure, will be huge. The money will be huge. So hey, I think it's fun. I was a purist when it came to baseball, and I didn't want them to add the wild card. I have repented. I think that has worked out well. And I think that, the opportunity to have more high visibility games works for everybody.
Yeah, I'm good with 12. I would have maybe done 8, but I'm good with 12. Much better than 4. Let's transition over to recruiting. So A&M had a few visitors last weekend. They'll have a few more this weekend. Be sure and check AggieYell. There's a short list for this weekend. And then following this weekend, Miami, there is a very long list. But anyways, following the game, we've had some movement on the recruiting front. What are your thoughts on Bravion Rogers coming back to A&M, recommitting, and getting back with this class? And then also a huge, pickup yesterday with TJ Shanahan.
It's interesting. When A&M first got Bravion Rogers back in June, I took a look at his stuff and thought, he's pretty darn good. And then I went back and watched it again this time around after seeing some of what he's done in the first weeks of the high school season his senior year. He's not pretty good. He's really good. I mean, this guy is, he's 37th in the country right now. and I think there were 33 5-stars last year. So he's right on the cusp of being a 5-star. And this is a guy I think that could
He's
get to
kind of
that
undercover.
status. Yeah. I mean, he's going to be a guy that can get to that status. And you take a look at, how A&M, rotated their corners on Saturday. Okay, Miles Jones is going to be gone next year.
You think that's a big reason
Brian,
why he committed?
I think that that certainly didn't hurt.
Right.
When you put the list up and he was on it to come to Sam instead of going over to New Orleans to watch that game, I thought the jig was up. That he was coming back. I think that rotating the corners the way they did, knowing that Miles Jones and Brian George will be gone next year, Jalen Jones has a good year, he could be gone. The opportunity for playing time is going to be there for him too. And I think that just TJ Rushing just did a great job convincing him that, yeah, you might have committed a little faster than you wanted to. You might have a little bit of buyer's remorse. But when you take a look around, you're going to find that, the best opportunity is still in College Station. So they, instead of letting him go, they redoubled their effort, and it worked. And I think Shanahan was one that you and I have been waiting for a while. That, we knew it was coming. It's just a matter of when. And I think that he's just a tremendous pickup. This is a guy that I've seen.
He looks like a defensive lineman. You're like,
it's just mean what he does to guys. He just abuses them. During the Dallas camp this year, he was going on a one-on-one against I forget who, but he got cheap shotted kind of on the first of the two one-on-ones, and he came back the next time and literally just got the guy by the shirt and threw him. And we're not talking about a small guy here. We're talking about 260 pounds or so. And he just physically discarded him like you would a sack of garbage. And at that point, I just looked at Nick Harris and went, that's done. He's 5-star. Man, nothing more to see here. So, that's the kind of guy that they need. He's an interior lineman. They want to improve their guard play. It's what they needed.
Mark, moving over to the recruiting side, we talked about Bravion Rogers, now TJ Shanahan. What are your thoughts on A&M picking him up yesterday?
Oh, that's a biggie. In more ways than one. You're talking about a guy who's extremely physical, very strong, plays nasty. I've seen him get angry with a guy at a rival's camp that he thought cheap shot at him in a one-on-one. The second time they went on at each other, he literally picked him up and tossed him like a sack of garbage. It was pretty impressive. I looked at that and was like, yeah, that kid's a 5-star. So I think that, you look at a guy like that, you put him next to Bryce Foster. You put Cam Dewberry on the other side of Foster. That's a very strong, physically imposing, guard center guard combination. And that's where you win. If you have power in the middle, you're going to be tough to deal with. So that was a critical get for the Aggies. I hate the phrase must get or priority target or whatever, but let's face it, they have been after Shanahan for a couple of years. They really wanted him, for obvious reasons. And, they worked through 2 different offensive line coaches and still were able to get him. So I think that's a coup. And, I don't think that they're done yet. So, the recruiting class is now up in the top 20, but if you look at the 21st or something like that, but if you look at the average star value, these guys are really, really good. And I think that's being overlooked. So if they can get a few more that continue to be at this level, I mean, it's not going to be a huge class. We know it's not going to be a huge class.
Right.
But if you can get to 18 guys that are of this caliber, that's still going to be very strong.
Yeah, exactly. So you think with, the classifications and recruiting, who's number 1, who's number whatever, 10, 12, top 20, whatever, the numbers, the amount, like A&M gets 18. Another school may get 25. How does that go? Like, how does that weigh each other out?
Well, I think that the fact that they may not get 20 commits or 20 signees will hurt them in the points total. But when you take a look at the average star per player, they're going to be right there at the top. I mean, right now, there's only one team ahead of them, and that's Alabama. And, there are still a lot of guys that they're very much in the mix for. So, if they can get to 18 and keep the star value about where it is now, that's going to be a very good, very accomplished class.
And I know September will bring a lot more announcements, perhaps. I know towards the end of September, we should be expecting some things, especially after the Miami game. So this is all just heating up, and it will definitely get exciting as this season goes on. Thank you all for joining week 2 of the F Word. I have to think about it for a second. The F Word podcast, the football podcast with Courtney and Mark for AggieYell.com.